So the new skills in a big data world, there's a lot to think about. If we look at people in business today and why they're successful and how they got to be where they are, they obviously need certain skills. They need to be good managers. They need to understand the business problems of their organization, et cetera. But then in computer science and in data science in particular, maybe they're good at math. Maybe they understand algorithms. Maybe they understand computer science. Maybe they understand some hard science that sort of relates to connectedness of information or dissemination of information. That's all great. And we still need all of those skills. But then there's this whole new set of skills that we need as leaders in organizations dealing with big data. We need to be able to understand problem formulation, epistemologies. What do you have to believe in order for what you're about to do to be true? We need to understand how to work in a world where we don't have a longitudinal data set of all the data for the last 10 years because this data just started to become available and we don't want to wait 10 years to start to use it. We maybe need to understand how to use things like sound, meaning, geoposition, phonemes in a language, the cultural nuance, the social media data, sentiment analysis, semantic disambiguation. These are all new skills. And so if you're a leader in an organization dealing with big data, one of the things I think that you really need to do is look at your bench, look at the skill sets that you have available. Do you have the right training in your organization? Are your people really growing in the ways that they need to grow? And then also, do you have the right people in the first place? And you might need some more people, or you might need a different mix. And I think that's all playing into this. You've got to stop and think. In this world that's changing so fast with so much information, what's different and what new skills do you need? If you don't, then you're going to increasingly get further behind that curve. Well, I think that if we look back, we've always had a big data problem to some extent, depending on how you want to define it, right? So if we look back to when we were first able to start to take information into anything automated, you know, depending on how far back you want to go, you can go to the 1890 census, right? They had too much information. That's great. Automation comes along, that helps us. But then as soon as automation comes along, some of that automation helps us collect more information, and here we go again, right? And we get into this cycle where, you know, the technology advances and then the data overwhelms the technology and then the technology advances and then we invent new words to talk about that. But to some extent, there's a little bit of history repeating itself. The evolutions that are happening along the way, I think, are in our ability as a human race to sort of become more comfortable with being overwhelmed with information, to be more comfortable with the fact that we may not know it all and we still have to make a decision with what we know. There's an old joke that says you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun the other campers, right? So, you know, can we get far enough in front of our competition that we can actually do something that's going to be meaningful for our customers and create some sort of a competitive moat while really understanding that we can't know it all and we can't wait until we do because we never will. So those evolutions of the human race really being comfortable with not being able to first know everything and sit down and take the time to analyze it. The pace of change is too quick. That's definitely one. And then the other would be, I would say, technological evolution. Don't get too distracted by it. You know, yes, use the best technology, use the smartest people, make sure they understand the technology, but never lead with the technology. Always lead with the problem formulation and what are you going to do about it. So how does language and culture play into the big data space? I suspect probably a lot more than we realize right now. So if we look at the creation of information right now, depending on whose estimates you want to use, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the information that we're creating is not being created by people. It's being created by systems and processes talking to other systems and processes, like your cell phone talking to the cell phone network. We don't have to worry about language there because there's a fixed ontology and we sort of understand it. But then when people start to talk, we mess everything up, right? So in social media, we use language, right? There's neologism. You use Twitter, you use a hashtag. You start to, you know, compress things and take shortcuts. We don't use perfect grammar anymore. So our language, even within one language and one culture, sort of evolves. But then you think about the interaction with globalization of one culture and another, which is happening at a grand scale right now. And the subtle nuance that happens when somebody in one culture says, I don't trust these people. Do they mean that I think they might be doing something sneaky, or do they mean I just can't reproduce what they did because they did it? Well, in one culture it might mean one thing, in another culture it might mean another thing, and the assumptions are where you get in trouble. I think what's happening in the social space is not so much the homogenization of communication that we might think it would be. We tend to live in a world that's one language. If we speak one language, if we speak more than one language, we seek out avenues for that other language. But how do those languages inform each other, and how do those cultures inform each other when they don't speak the same language? I think we're only beginning to really understand that. Sadly, when you read a lot of the research about this, it's only available in one language. So it's somewhat of a self-perpetuating problem, and one that I don't think has really been studied enough to completely understand, but I suspect that this is going to become a bigger thing, not a smaller thing.